Hey guys, today we're going to talk about nucleic acids, our third organic compound. So like all of the other organic compounds, the first thing we're going to start with is what the function of a nucleic acid is. And nucleic acids are going to store and transmit genetic and hereditary information, meaning that the nucleic acid will hold on to your genetic code, and that keeps it inside of your cells. When it's time to have offspring, your genetic code is passed on from you to your offspring, and that's how your offspring will inherit your genes. You will find nucleic acids in two parts of the cell: the nucleus, which is this, it's usually one of the larger, it's usually drawn as a circle structure in the cell, and also in the cytoplasm, which is this orange area on the outside of the cell. The monomer of a nucleic acid is called a nucleotide, and a nucleotide has three parts that make it up. The first is a 5-carbon sugar, that's right here, this blue pentagon. Then you have a phosphate group, it's a little circle above the pentagon, and then you have the nitrogen base, which is represented here by this green rectangle. So when we draw a picture of a nucleotide, we're actually not going to draw the lines connecting the phosphate and the nitrogen base to the sugar. When we draw a nucleotide, you are going to draw a pentagon, so a house-like structure, like mine. Oh, maybe yours is better than that. That will be the sugar, the 5-carbon sugar. So I'll write that in blue. 5-carbon sugar. And then you're going to have the nitrogen base, which I want to make green. And lastly, the phosphate group. So when we draw the phosphate group, it's going to be represented with a circle. Yours will be better than mine, above the 5-carbon sugar. And then the nitrogen base sticks right out to the side of the 5-carbon sugar. I remember, and I think that this picture looks awfully close to a picture of a house, the sugar, the phosphate group looking like the sun over the house, and then the nitrogen base looking like the garage attached to the house. That's just how I happen to remember what a nucleic acid's monomer looks like: a house with a sun and a garage. So far we have found out the function of a nucleic acid. We've talked about the monomer and what the monomer looks like and the parts of the monomer. Now we're going to talk about the polymers. Nucleic acids have two polymers. The first is DNA. You've probably heard of it before, or you should have heard of it before. DNA stands for deoxy, that's the D. Deoxyribo specifically is the D. Nucleic is the N, and A stands for acid. DNA's general structure is going to be a double chain of nucleotides, and it's found in all of your cells. So by double chain, I mean that you have two strands of nucleotides that are connected in the middle and they twist. You will find DNA specifically in the nucleus. So before, when we said you can find nucleic acids in two parts, DNA is found in the nucleus, especially if there's a nucleus for the cell. And what DNA does is it makes up your genes, it makes up your genes. And what your genes are going to be used for, your genes are going to determine a particular protein that is produced, and then that protein is going to correlate to a specific trait, such as your hair color, or another trait could be your height, or another trait could be whether you have freckles or not. And it's the code for those proteins, and when you have offspring, you pass on that code to your offspring. And so your children can look like you, and you can look like your parents. So that's the first. DNA is also going to control cellular activities. So besides containing your genes, it's going to control cellular activities, specifically the production of proteins. control cellular activities, specifically the production of proteins. And there are hormones and other chemical signals in your body that tell your cells what genes to use, when to turn them on, when to turn them off, how much of a protein should be made, depending upon how much DNA is accessed or how frequently it's accessed. But your DNA will control all of those things. A picture of DNA, now bear with me because I'm drawing with a mouse, but you have one strand. It should be kind of weaving like this. That's one strand. The other strand I'll do in light blue, just so that it's still blue to represent the sugar, but you can see that there's two strands here. They twist together. In the center, you are going to find these lines. So it kind of looks like a ladder. It's usually referred to as a twisted ladder. And the rungs of the ladder, or these lines that I'm drawing across, are going to be the nitrogen bases. You have two of them meeting. So if I highlight this one in yellow, this is one nitrogen base, there's a nitrogen base over here. And on the sides where the blue is, you'll have the sugar, and then you'll have actually a phosphate group in between. So I could like put a little orange dot here and a little orange dot here above each of these nitrogen bases. But usually we don't draw that little dot right there. But that dot is representing the sides are alternating sugars and phosphates. So that's DNA. RNA stands for ribonucleic acid. So the R is ribo, N is nucleic, A is acid. This differs from DNA because RNA is actually a single strand of nucleotides. So it's about half the size of one strand of DNA. And we need RNA because RNA is going to help us make proteins. RNA is found in the cytoplasm of the cells, and its sole job is to be the physical mechanism by which we produce proteins in our cells. So all of your cells are going to have it, and all they're going to do is just churn out proteins, one after the other after the other. So when you draw a picture of RNA, you draw just kind of like a squiggly line with your nitrogen bases sticking off to the side. And that, not very good, but that would be a picture of RNA. So the test. One of the last things that you need to know about any of your organic compounds is how to test for the presence of these compounds. It's important to note that there is no chemical indicator to test for the presence of nucleic acids. I cannot drop a chemical onto a sample of our baby food and determine whether there is actually nucleic acid in there or not. So that tends to make some people uneasy. You want to know exactly how do I figure out if nucleic acid is in it. So it comes down to this question. You have to ask yourself this question. Was the organism living or not living? If the organism is living or was once living, then that organism or that food or that substance will contain nucleic acids. If your answer is no, that it's not living or was never living, then it does not contain nucleic acids. So let's check yourself. There are 3 questions I want you to answer. The first is give 3 functions of DNA and or RNA. The second, tell me what the monomers of nucleic acids are called. And the third question, go ahead and provide at least one difference between DNA and RNA. So if you've had an opportunity to do that, let's go over the answers. 3 functions of DNA. I have the general definition of the function of nucleic acids, and that's to store and transmit genetic and hereditary information. You could say that DNA determines your genes and your traits. You could say that DNA controls cellular activities. And you could say that RNA is used to produce proteins. So that's actually 4 functions, but any combination of those 3 would be correct. The second question, what are the monomers of nucleic acids called? They are called nucleotides. Remember, you have the phosphate, the sugar, and the nitrogen base. And what's one difference between the 2? You could talk about the structure of DNA versus RNA. DNA is double-stranded, RNA is single-stranded. You could specify that DNA is found in the nucleus and RNA is found in the cytoplasm. Those are both valid answers. So flip your paper over. We are going to color this sheet with the picture of DNA and RNA. I'm going to use 3 colors, same 3 colors I've been using the whole time: orange, green, and blue. You're more than welcome to use any different colors. Try as best as you can to make it match what you used if you used any colors on the front. So the first thing we're going to start with is the phosphate group. The phosphate group, although it's not drawn as a circle, it's represented here by these rectangles, these small skinny rectangles. You can see the little P sticking out from it. That P stands for phosphate. So if you go ahead and take your coloring utensil, I'm using orange, and go ahead and color all of the skinny rectangles orange. Boom, boom, boom. Okay. Now once you have that complete, then we're going to move on to the next thing, the nitrogen bases. The nitrogen bases are going to be green. So the nitrogen bases, like in our other picture, are the steps in this model. Here we have them across the center. You can see that there are 2 separate ones. You don't have to worry right now why they have different shapes, but that's because there are actually multiple different types of nitrogen bases you can have. We're not worried about that right now. We're just worried about knowing that they are called nitrogen bases. So they get colored green. The last thing is the sugar. Now, although the nitrogen base isn't labeled, the phosphate is labeled, and there is another molecule labeled D. This D stands for the name of the sugar. The name of the sugar found in DNA and RNA actually gives its name to the molecule itself. And for DNA, which if you recall the full name of DNA stands for deoxyribonucleic acid, the D stands for deoxyribose. Remember, sugars end in OSE. So I'm going to, after I color these in, I'm going to go over here and I'm going to specify that it stands for deoxyribose. There you go. You should be able to see all of it. Deoxyribose. And that's what that D is standing for. The last thing on here is the little circles connecting the nitrogen bases together, and those are a special bond that's found in nucleic acids, only in nucleic acids. It's strong yet weak at the same time, and that bond is called a hydrogen bond. Hydrogen bond. And I'll write that in black just because you probably won't be able to see yellow. So that's what the yellow is pointing to, a hydrogen bond. There you go. And so that's DNA. Now, next to DNA, you're going to find your picture of RNA. So just like in DNA, we have these small little rectangles that are represented with the letter P, and those are your phosphate groups. And then just like in DNA, you have nitrogen bases, right? So they get colored green. The last thing is going to be the sugar. The sugar here, if you'll notice, it's labeled R. Remember, RNA, the R stands for ribonucleic. Here, the sugar in RNA is called ribose. And that is your picture of RNA. So this concludes your notes on nucleic acids. If you have any questions about nucleic acids, stop by and see me, and I'll be glad to talk about it with you.